the purpose of MiCA is not to replace MiFID. It's not to replace current regulations. It's simply to say there's a gap here in the regulatory space, which of assets that aren't covered. We are producing regulations for those asset classes that aren't currently covered. Security tokens will fall within MiFID, not MiCA.
And exactly, that's the key thing. It's bringing crypto in line with other traditional asset classes. There was a gap there, Europe recognised it, and they've covered that gap by bringing in MiCA.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Valhalla Vault. Today we're discussing MiCA, Markets in Crypto Assets, the new regulations coming out in Europe, the effect that they could have on the crypto industry, and how they relate to previous regulations which are still in force, like MiFID. Joining us today, I'm very pleased to have our Head of Compliance at Valhalla Network, Mark Jolly. Mark has had over 2 decades worth of experience in legal, risk and compliance throughout different European countries and the United Kingdom. Heavily experienced in various banking and financial regulations as well, including various AML, KYC regulations, marketing regulations, MiFID, a lot of time spent on MiFID, and now he's learning MiCA as well and getting his head deep into MiCA. So we've had lots of conversations with legal advisors, the likes of Mark as well, and at conferences. We've had to explore it in a lot of detail, Mark, and today we like to get some more information from you and really dig deep into MiCA. So welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you on.
Yeah.
And please, could you start with a little overview as to what is actually MiCA, defining MiCA for us, and what it means for the crypto industry?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me today. I'm going to get a chance to showcase this key regulation. It's seismic, it's groundbreaking. It's going to be the most progressive regulation worldwide. I expect it to be a template for what other regulators will use in the future. It's going to bring a number of fundamentals to the crypto world. I mean, at the minute, crypto is seen as a risky investment, which it is, but we need to make sure that crypto is seen as a asset class that can be readily invested in. It's got the same frameworks, the same regulations as other asset classes.
Also, what you're saying is, at the moment, if I'm right, crypto is seen as the Wild West.
Yes.
So a lot of people, especially people who aren't in crypto, haven't looked at crypto at all. It's seen as, we don't believe in it. It's just a way for scammers to make money. It's a way for people to take advantage of people's naivety or anything like that, because they don't understand it. Yes. And there's not that many regulations around. There's a lot of cases in the media as well around people taking advantage of the lack of regulations, yes, although it's still daft because there's still fraud regulations there. If you commit fraud, you commit fraud, regardless of what you're doing. And what MiCA is doing is it's bringing a legal framework in place to allow good projects, serious projects, to actually have the capability of expanding and growing and bringing in both institutional and new users into the space that might not feel comfortable without regulatory environment there. Because without regulations and without a framework, it's quite difficult for companies to know what they're allowed to do, what they're supposed to do, and how they're supposed to, report this to the regulators, how they're supposed to engage with regulators. So this is a massive step forward for the industry. Yep. It's making it more clear that this is a serious industry now. It's not just it's not just an idea, a space that some people are playing in as such. It's actually a serious space which people are building in and coming up with innovative projects which can change the world.
Yeah, exactly. And we've seen crypto grow exponentially since 2017, and it's part of it. Even though mentioned before, there's not many people invested in it. It's still the market cap as at 2023. There's 1 trillion market cap of all crypto asset, the value of crypto asset firms. There's 240 billion of stable coins. These are big numbers, and they need to to be outside regulation and have light touch approach is not acceptable in today's climate. It needs to be brought in. Europe, the ECB, ESMA, they're aware of that, and they want to bring the framework and parameters around so consumers can have those protections.
What's ESMA?
So European Securities Market Authority. So they're essentially the extraterritorial regulator that trickles down regulations to the NCAs, National Competent Authorities, FCA in the UK, BaFin in Germany, FMA, Liechtenstein. It brings it all for all 27 European member states. So they've been the one who've been providing the the papers with the regulatory technical standards. These can be like consultation papers. So they provide the guidance as to what they expect to be delivered by set date.
This new regulatory framework that's coming in, it's providing reassurance to both consumers and to companies as to how to properly go about their business in order to be within, regulations, do things properly, best practice. What are the other benefits that MiCA is going to bring to the Web3 industry?
There are a number of significant benefits. They can go from harmonization, consumer protection. Yeah, there's too many to mention. I mean, what we talk about Europe at the minute is, I mentioned about the 27 EU members of state. They've all got different rules and regulations in that jurisdiction. What Europe is trying to enable an enabler for firms to do business across the continent. They haven't got to be worried about different rules and regulations, the cost implications of doing so, the layers of complexity. They're trying to, that harmonisation is a massive benefit it will bring to the industry. That's not to say that countries still can't gold plate, but yeah, 99% of the rules will be across the continent, and that's going to be a massive benefit for not only the firm but the consumer as well.
Do you think you'll see a large inflow of money into the Web3 space as soon as MiCA is properly fully rolled out, both institutional and consumer?
I really do. I don't think it'll happen instantaneously. I think people are going to want to see these things embedded and firms adhering to the rules. But I do think there'll be a lot more institutional money. I think there'll be more retail money coming in. I think the assurance MiCA will bring, it will undoubtedly do so. Yes.
For a project like ours, Mark, we are a hybrid. We're bridging the gap between the traditional finance space and the decentralized finance space as such. Not too much DeFi, but more sort of decentralized governance as much as possible with the traditional banking regulatory space. For us, we massively welcome these regulations, don't we? Because it's going to, not only are we already going to be trying to operate as much as possible in the regulatory space, so this is just an add-on for us as to, it makes the combination of what we're doing with the banking regulations easier, isn't it?
It does. I mean, that's a good flag there, because obviously we're going to be obtaining a banking license at the same time, and obviously the rules and regulations are very onerous. But we've never been scared of regulations. We like you said before, we welcome them. We want to make sure that we want to be best in class. We want to show firms how to roll out regulations, and you'll see that if people read our white paper, we've taken great strides in developing that, reading the consultation papers. We're just doing some fine tuning to it to make sure that it adheres to every regulatory requirement. But we take these things very seriously, and that's what I think we're good at. We not only these new regulations. There's going to be many firms who haven't gone through the regulatory handbook in yesteryear. We've had in a team, we've had people who've gone through multi-jurisdiction regulations.
That's true. Like just adopting more regulations for us, it's easier because we're already used to having to abide by regulations, having to read regulations, understand them, try to implement them into what we're doing, and take them from what they're saying to what it means in practice.
Yes.
Whereas firms that have never worked with regulations are not used to it. This is new for them. This is, wow, we thought we were outside the regulations. We thought we were working in this lovely Wild West space, as some firms, wanted to be. Oh, we don't want to go near regulators. That's not how the world works. You're not going to be able to escape the regulators entirely. To suddenly, there's regulations here now we have to adhere to, otherwise we could get in trouble. And they're not used to being able to implement them. Yeah,
and I think this is it. I mean, I know we've had many conversations, Ollie, about previous regulations, and that's why I think it will hold us in good stead. We lived and we went through all the hard miles of MiFID II, and MiCA really it's adopted MiFID as sort of a blueprint as to how the regulatory framework will work for crypto assets. So we know how consultation papers were brought in. We saw we have proof of what happened after 2018 with the implementation of MiFID, and we saw how the regulatory.
So very quickly, MiCA stands for Markets in Crypto Assets. MiFID stands for
Markets in Financial Instruments Directive.
And for the average person not inside regulatory space, not living regulations and reading papers all day, which I'm sure is very few of you. We all love to read regulatory papers and rules all the time. But MiFID, in short, covers securities. Is that correct?
It does, yeah. So it's all typical asset classes. Equities, bonds. It covered all financial instruments.
Okay.
It went live beginning of 2018, and it essentially was many things that MiCA was doing, will be doing in end of December, excluding stablecoins, which went live in June, and it will be looking at transaction reporting, custody, consumer protection. So there's lots of things that MiCA will be doing then. So it's bringing crypto assets to life and making sure that they've got the same level of protections and assurances that are in asset classes. Yeah, exactly.
And it's really good because I'm wound up, and I'm sure many people are, the amount of scam projects and not necessarily scam projects, but low quality projects in the Web3 space over the last couple of years, where people are they're losing money in it. They're investing in things they don't understand. The projects aren't abiding by any sort of regulatory standard. Winds me up, because there's good projects that come into the space like ours, where we're trying to come in, we're trying to do something good, but we're sort of painted with the same brush of, oh, you're crypto, oh, that means you might be dodgy or something like that. It's like, no, it's just that there's a few projects ruining it for everyone. So I do welcome it. And talking about MiFID, I'm keen to go into detail about the timeline of MiCA, the rollout of MiCA, how it's going. But also, before we go into that, what was the main reason for MiFID coming in? Why was it coming in at that time?
Again, there was previous scandals that happened between 2012 2017. There were shortcomings in MiFID 1, and there was enhancements. And much of it was to do with best execution. There was scandals where firms were artificially inflating prices. So when customers did come to execute, they weren't getting the best price available at the time. So, for example, with MiFID, there was RTS 27, RTS 28 reporting. So what essentially RTS 27 and 28 did was 28 shows you the best execution venues and how they performed against the. I don't want to get into too much. It's too much.
Yeah, let's not go into too much detail, but it was to combat the dirty practices being done in the industry between 2012
and 2017. It is, and that point you made there is good. It's really important. I think it's worth just talking about it briefly. You talk about, we welcome MiCA, good, investor confidence in the market. Mm-hmm. There are going to be bad eggs that bring us all down, and this is what MiCA will shift out these bad actors. They'll be brought to justice for one thing, but we know that customers need to have faith in crypto assets to when they invest their hard-earned money, that they can trust that this is not only just a viable project, but this is a well-run project. It adheres to regulations that are which are on par with asset managers, institutional managers, reputable firms, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, BlackRock. There will be in years to come, 20, 30 years down the line, crypto asset firms we should be held in the same regard. I know we've gone through numerous scandals, and bankers are seen as But
for the user, it's going to bring more confidence to the industry, more oversight. That's the key bit. Oversight as to what firms are doing, and making sure people aren't just getting involved in dodgy firms.
Exactly.
And as much as possible. Before we discuss the actual rollout of MiCA, then I think it's probably better first we look at what does MiCA cover. We've already gone into a little bit of detail as to what falls in scope and what falls out of scope, and we've mentioned that MiFID covers still security. So tokens which aren't utility tokens, for example. So you'll be aware that many firms were trying to make sure that they would be classified as a utility token, and many of them weren't even sure. They were just saying, oh yeah, we're a utility token without actually getting any legal advice. But those firms which are now coming out, and the SEC has tried many times to pursue various high-profile cases and saying that that's a security when it's then been argued that it's not a security. But if it's a security, the key part is that it's not within MiCA then. It falls out of the scope of MiCA and it goes into MiFID regulations, which is a whole, how many pages of regulations is MiFID for a security? Thousands?
Many thousands. Yes.
Many thousands of pages of regulations would have to be covered, which is why I think so many firms are, no, we're not a security. We want MiCA. We don't want to have to look at MiFID, which is a whole other avenue. So, in terms of the different asset classes and different users of MiCA, could you give us a breakdown, Mark?
Yeah, so ESMA in their guidance, they classify it in three different strands. So we've got ARTs, asset reference tokens. They could be like pegged to like a commodity, a currency, and it's essentially is a crypto asset that is referenced to them. We've got
so it's like a stable coin that's pegged to gold, for example.
Exactly,
okay.
And gold's very in vogue. So there's a lot of good crypto assets doing well on that. There's ERTs, which is electronic money token, and that's covered by that's a stable coin, and that went live in just June, so not
recently,
very very recently. And then we've got other tokens they coined it, and the biggest other one is utility token, like you say. So that is what our token will be covered by. Will be an ERC20, and then there's other things that are out of scope, and that will be in years to come under probably MiCA 2, but that will be, these are like NFTs and
DeFi and DEXs
exactly, and they're out of scope currently. But I know there's already talk about them coming in the future. In next fund.
So those are the tokens, and that's falling under token issuers. So that's under the category token issuers. As a token issuer, so for example, us, Valhalla Network, we would be in the token issuer category, and we would be other token, a utility token. And based on that, we would have various criteria we have to fulfill in order to be MiCA compliant for that. But then there's a whole other category, isn't there? You've got crypto asset service providers, CASPs, and that would include exchanges, portfolio managers, and various other service providers for the Web3 space. Such as all these Binance, KuCoin, all these big exchanges would fall under as a CASP, wouldn't it? People who can take custody of your tokens for you and look after them, that'd be under CASP as well, wouldn't it? And there's various other criteria, much more than I think for utility tokens, that they have to fulfill as well.
Exactly, and requirements for CASP. So there's 126 articles in MiCA, and CASP will be pretty covered. Will be covered in most of these articles. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work for utility tokens, but there's an awful lot of work for these CASP. Like you said, we're doing a whole raft: admin, depository, custody. There's just a number of things that they need to make sure they adhere to.
And to be clear, the purpose of MiCA is not to replace MiFID. It's not to replace current regulations. It's simply to say there's a gap here in the regulatory space, of assets that aren't covered. We are producing regulations for those asset classes that aren't currently covered. Security tokens will fall within MiFID, not MiCA.
And exactly, that's the key thing. It's bringing crypto in line with other traditional asset classes. There was a gap there. Europe recognised it, and they've covered that gap by bringing in MiCA.
Brilliant, thank you. So then, in terms of the requirements for a project like Valhalla Network, which is a utility token, and it falls under token issuers, utility token, what would Valhalla Network and what will Valhalla Network have to do, and other projects like ours have to do in order to be compliant with MiCA?
Yeah. So the biggest one is white paper rules. So a white paper essentially is like a prospectus. So an investor can come into the project, look at the document, and it will outline what our token will do. It will talk about all the risks, how our token will work in practice. And our white paper goes into a lot of depth as to how it will work. So when potential investors look at a white paper, they should take assurance that everything is being said and delineated in this white paper they can trust, because what will happen is the national competent authorities will hold firms liable for anything in a white paper that they can't stand up, they can't back up with how it works in practice. So any investor out there...
By national competent authority, what do you mean?
So that is a national regulator, whether that's FCA, UK, BaFin in Germany.
Exactly. SEC, FMA, etc., all these different...
Exactly. And the thing is, even though ESMA in Europe have drafted these guidelines, it will be the national competent authorities who will be the gatekeepers. They'll be the ones who will be prosecuting, bringing penalties.
So ESMA is sort of like the oversight body, the ones providing information to the national competent authorities, and to make sure everyone's in the same boat, to make sure everyone is applying the same regulations.
I was going to caveat that slightly. There will be certain rules where you will be regulated by Europe, but you have to have... I don't know all the deadlines.
It's much more money and much more
even
customers. Big
firms like Binance, I think you've got to have 15 million users. We're not there yet, but in years to come, there could be some big players that are authorised directly by Europe ESMA.
Well, I think Binance will be. I imagine
Eventually,
so.
but from what I've been reading, that they don't fulfill that criteria currently, so they wouldn't be.
Okay.
So if you've got a big player like Binance aren't currently doing it, that's not to say, like I say, as crypto grows, more investors go in it, more money flows into it. I can see some of the big players becoming like being a BlackRock in the industry and being authorized.
Well, let's hope not entirely like the BlackRock of the industry, but size-wise, they might be BlackRock of the industry.
Yeah.
Let's hope not quite the same boat as BlackRock. Okay. So then the national competent authorities, they're the ones who, like you say, they look at the information from ESMA, the information the guidance they've received, and they decide how to actually regulate, how to apply those regulations in their jurisdictions, and then how to stamp their foot, put their fist down and say you're not adhering to regulations, and how to treat businesses which are falling outside the scope of that.
Exactly.
On that note, actually, it'd be interesting. So you've obviously seen MiFID. You've seen how the regulators brought in MiFID, grace period, all that. Now, MiCA, going into the rollout of and the timeline of MiCA, when did it start? When was the first conversation about MiCA? When did it start the consultation review process? How long has it taken to get to where it is now, and what's the next steps?
Yeah. 2017 was when I think that it was first getting bounded about. There was a lot of people in the European Parliament and people, a number of other bodies. It was saying, we need to start. There's been a number of violations. There's been, there's a gap in the crypto world, and we need to make sure that's covered. So it really did grow and grow and grow. It started getting talked about in European Parliament 2021, 22. Okay. It finally got approved at Parliament in June 2023, and then since then implementation phases began, and then it went live for stablecoins end of June, and for all other assets it's going live end of December this year. You touched on there will be a grandfathering period potentially that can be harnessed by different NCAs.
Also grandfathering period.
So essentially that gives that jurisdiction allowances to have up to 18 months to bring in to make sure the rules are being adhered to. So even though we've got this hard date of December, I just want to make sure that investors are, people are aware that it doesn't mean that every single country will be ready by December.
I see. So what effectively ESMA is saying, look, we want all the countries in our member states to abide by the same regulations, have the same regulatory standard, so that it's easy for every firm and country to work together. Okay. However, we appreciate that each national competent authority needs some time to be able to actually get their heads around this, to work out how they want to regulate, how they want to take action against firms which aren't compliant. So we're going to give an 18-month period for the national competent authorities to work themselves out and to decide how it's happened, which means firms within the countries need to get a little bit of understanding as to when it's going to apply to them. Yes, December is when they should be, for utility tokens, for example, when they should be thinking it applies. But there's a little bit of time after that where there's going to be some wiggle room as to making sure everyone's compliant, making sure everyone's in the same.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this has been brought into bringing a level playing field. And to me, you're not going to get a total level playing field until 18 months after. I've already seen that Germany, I think, has asked for a year. I think Italy's asked for 15 months. But ESMA has been quite. They've come out and they've said they'd rather this grandfathering period is not utilised, and if it is harnessed, try and keep it within 6 months, a year.
Okay.
So they've not been something. There's something they want. They're aware that if you do have these inconsistencies across the continent, some firms, some countries will be more advantageous in this 18-month period. So these are not official times yet. I'm just wary if I start saying a year for Germany, they may bring it down. This is all what I'm reading.
Yeah, this
now.
is all at the moment still in the air.
But France has brought it in.
So the consultation periods happened. 2017 was when people were in a pub talking about it, saying this needs to happen, and then 2021, 2022 is when it started making some real headway and being spoken about in Parliament, and then recently, June, end of June was when the regulations were applied for security. Stable coins.
Exactly.
So
it's groundbreaking, as I said before. But this is MiCA's gone live now for certain firms. As I mentioned before, stable coins makes up it's hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds. These firms are worth, and we've seen a number of contentious matters that have happened already. So some of the biggest players in the world aren't actually adhering to MiCA, and we and it's not being consistently applied by all the platforms as to what they're going to do about these firms that aren't in adherence to MiCA. So this is something, I find it fascinating because this is going to happen in December, and if the grandfathering period's evoked, what is MiCA going to do?
It is actually really interesting because stablecoins, as you said, came out end of June is when stablecoins have to be MiCA compliant, and you will have seen that the biggest one, Circle, USDC, they are compliant with MiCA, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think
there's many others.
They're seen as sort of best in class. I mean, they've got a lot of plaudits who've come out and they've been approved formally by the regulator. I think it's in France, So they're the French regulator.
Okay.
So
I can't remember the name. Can you?
I'm trying AMF.
Okay.
We'll fact check that after. But no, so they've been formally recognised, and it's a big kudos to them for doing so.
And there's a few others as well which have been.
They have.
But okay, so stablecoins are already in force for everything else. Utility tokens, which is other. So does stablecoin also applies to asset reference tokens as well? Is that end of June?
That'll be in
December.
Yes.
Okay. So then we've got crypto asset service providers. That's also end of December. So that covers the exchanges, portfolio managers, custodials. All that is end of December. Now, the interesting part is these stable coins which aren't compliant, such as Tether, which isn't compliant at the moment. Well, first off, why do you think Tether's not compliant? Because they are the largest, I think, globally, stablecoin, aren't they?
They are. I mean, they're specialists in US dollars, but they're still many millions in European domicile.
I don't understand why they wouldn't want to be compliant, because the SEC at some point, the American regulations are going to catch up and apply something. If it's not the same as MiCA, they're going to apply something similar to MiCA. So these firms that aren't compliant, at some point, they can't argue, well, we don't care about the European regulations. We're abiding by American regulations. They can't do that because at some point it's going to come into effect for them as well. So why do you think the largest or some of the largest stable coins out there are not MiCA compliant, or not interested in being MiCA compliant, or looking like they are taking action?
I mean, obviously we don't work for Tether, and I'm always obviously worried. Sometimes you can be saying things that are potentially libelous. But for me, Tether have got the manpower, they've got the resources to adhere to MiCA.
So there's no real obvious reason.
I'm happy to speculate on this, but to me, MiCA's got some tough rules in relation to how much assets they expect to be held back. So if there was problems with customers wanting to get their money back, by way of example, it's in reliable sources. I think they asked for 30%.
Wow.
I can't remember the breakdown of it.
Well, a stable coin, it should be 100% anyway.
But and I don't believe, and this needs to be audited, and I don't believe they have got this 30% readily at call, and because of that, they can't be adhered to MiCA.
Perhaps.
The CEO of Tether has come out and talked about the problematic nature of MiCA, and sometimes I've heard commentators talk about definitions of MiCA, and some of them haven't been made crystal clear. Fine, this is haven't been MiFID. There's always going to be some but definitions need to be, to be honed, and you talk to other practitioners and you iron out these issues together.
Which is fair. We've discussed that as well. With regulations, it can be at times, like even the banking regulations, you and I have had conversations where we said, what does that mean? Oh, let's try and understand that. You've got to dig deeper, and you've got to try to work out what they actually mean by these by these words. So I do appreciate that. However, MiCA, we've looked at it. We agree with it. Other stable coins have managed to adhere to it, and they've not come back with a lot of backlash or anything about the regulations. I think many people are just in favor of MiCA. So without speculating too much, it does seem a bit strange, that's all we can say, that some of these larger stablecoin providers, they are not at the moment looking to adhere to MiCA, and instead coming up with excuses for why they're not going down that process, even though MiCA has all these requirements that they've got to do checking, and does it have to be auditing as well?
It has to be audited.
There's audits as well in place. So without speculation, there could be other reasons at play as well for why any of these stablecoin providers might not want to be MiCA compliant at this stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And what's going to be interesting for me, and maybe for the viewers, is how firms such as Binance and big crypto platforms, how they're going to deal with Tether.
Because who's liable? So the regulations for stablecoins came out at the end of June. Regulations for crypto asset service providers comes out in December. So Binance, for example, so October, Binance has, let's say, USDT available. Who is responsible? Is it even applying to Binance at this point? Because they aren't covered until December. So is Tether liable? And then after December, who's liable? Are both of them liable? Is the issuer and the service provider? Now, you give me your opinion, but in my opinion, I think after December, it'll be both of them. Before December, it's just the issuer. As in, because that's the only one it applies to. After December, it's going to be both the issuer and the service provider who are liable, because they both fall in the scope of MiCA and they're not adhering to it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's complex. What I mean, why I say it's complex is because Binance have recognised that they've come out on record many times, and they've recognised that Tether don't adhere to regulations. They've talked about they're sort of on the watch list.
Okay.
But yeah, when these big
is that Binance watch list? Is it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just on the watch list that they're aware they're not MiCA compliant. But these big finance firms, I'm not trying to defend any action that's been taken, but Binance and other trading platforms have to look out for their underlying customer base as well. This is what's going to happen when the NCAs and obviously ESMA and eBay, when they look at these cases and they decide what is what's seen as good and best practice, and how firms should be looking at firms who are out not adhering to regulations, what actions should be taken. I mean, I agree. By the rules, they're breaching regulations, and they could be brought to
task on that.
They could, but some Coinbase is just. I think I might say they've actually removed Tether. You can't trade Tether on that exchange anymore. Binance have. It's a fluid thing. They'll probably put some sort of, they might put a risk warning saying, please be aware that this firm is not regulated and some sort of disclaimer. Yeah. But in a minute, they've not been removed, as to my understanding, and it's going to be interesting how other platforms adopt to this. But you're right. I think that Binance will probably have a defendable position because they're doing so their underlying customers can still trade Tether in the interim period. And maybe give chance. I don't expect Tether will become MiCA compliant anytime soon.
And with the warnings out there, they can argue, well, we've put warnings out. In fact, I think it would be a good conversation for the crypto asset service providers to have with the regulator, the National Competent Authority, to say to them, look, we want to be MiCA compliant. We appreciate that this stablecoin on our platform is not MiCA compliant. Well, how would you like us to proceed? Because these regulations are all around, really, the end result is consumer protection. Making sure the end user is protected from devious behavior. That's the main reason for MiCA, isn't it? And for regulation.
We saw it, with FTX and stuff. We saw that live.
Exactly.
It went under. Customers want their assets back. They couldn't get it back. At least, if you've got your 30% ring fence and all the other rules, there's going to be customers will have safe havens where they can get their money back at call. And if MiCA had been around,
when FTX happened,
I'm not saying we can be safe in knowing that it would not have been as catastrophic then, because there would have been safeguards in place.
Yes. So consumer protection is at the forefront. An exchange goes to an NCA and they say, look, you want us to remove USDT or whatever, or perhaps that's what the regulator is saying if Tether isn't compliant at that point, or any of these stable coins that aren't compliant at that time. However, X number of our users are exposed to USDT. If we just remove that, they are at risk of not being able to trade or not, they lose funds.
Yeah.
So for them, it doesn't protect them from us removing this. How would you like us to proceed? And maybe what I would think is the most appropriate action would be they say, do not allow anyone else to be exposed to this, put risk warnings out there for the users which are currently exposed, and allow them to continue to trade out of it, but don't allow them to become more exposed. So that over time, the amount of exposure of their user base goes down to a point where the regulators and the exchange could then come to an agreement and say, it is now time to remove the token or the stablecoin or whatever. At this point, it's going to be applying to utility tokens as well. So it might be utility tokens aren't MiCA compliant. And if there's large exposure there, they give the time as well. And then that's it. That is no longer being able to trade it on platform. So you would expect for utility token, for example, the price might decline over time as people realize, crikey, we need to sell this. We can't. It's going to be off the exchange soon. Do you think that's the most likely?
I mean, I think given NCA's a roadmap as to how their expectations, how they would deal with, give them a bit of handholding, give them a bit of steer. This is what I think sometimes the industry is worried about. They don't have, even though they know the rules, but they don't know how to necessarily apply them for like you say, for the benefit of the end user. This is what these regulations are primarily there for. So with the end user in mind, pragmatism needs to be applied in a lot of instances. And I think there's a lot of good recommendations by, you've obviously thought about this, which is, if you go to show what sort of person you are.
Thank you, Mark.
But
much appreciated.
Well, how do you, I'm going to, how the regulators are going to come down on. I know we're focused on Tether. I'm only doing so because Tether is so
It's
massive.
the biggest. Yeah.
There's plenty out there aren't MiCA compliant. There's probably more, stablecoins that aren't MiCA compliant than are MiCA compliant, and this is good. And this is, well, I'll let you know.
It's a pain, but so we talk about the interesting ones as well: DeFi, DEXs, and NFTs, which aren't currently in MiCA. And in MiCA 2, I think NFTs are going to be covered, non-fungible.
Oh yeah, we're talking MiCA 2, like it's imminent.
MiFID happened.
This is the thing. Anything like Basel, MiFID, they're already talking IFMD. They talk about the tech transfer just after it's gone live. So I don't foresee these things coming.
It takes so long, though. That's why they need to talk about it, because it takes so long to go through the whole
MiFID
process.
1, 2009, MiFID 2, 2017.
Exactly. So they need to talk about MiCA 2 now in order to start the process of we know that this isn't going to be perfect.
So probably 8 or 9 years until the next installment. So yeah.
No, I think in this space, personally, I think it's going to be 4 or 5 years.
We'll revisit this video then, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a bet on then. I'll tell you what, I'll bet you 1,000 USDT. So yeah, I think it will be quicker then, just because of the space itself is a quicker space. It's fast moving, it's innovating. That's the whole point of it. So if the regulators can't move at that pace as well, it doesn't look good. So I think it will be quicker. But these tokens, it's an interesting one. DEXs and DeFi, they're really interesting, because then who's liable? A DeFi project, and I think at the moment they're saying if it's completely DeFi, it wouldn't be. There's no way of it being, and if it's complete DEX, decentralized exchange, there's no way for it to be incorporated, because who's responsible? Mm-hmm. But there's one element which is centralized, or there's a slight amount of centralization, and that is what the regulators can jump on and say, because there's a little bit of centralization there, you do have to be MiCA compliant.
It's the DEX definitely, and there is a lot of talk if you go onto forums about DEX and MiCA compliant, and there is that talk if you're in scope by just slightly, you're in scope.
DEXs and DeFi, they do have to be compliant with MiCA. They are in scope of it if there's that centralization element. It's only the decentralized, fully decentralized DeFi and DEXs which aren't going to be within MiCA at this point in time. And at the moment, it's up to the firms, isn't it? They're trying to decide. They're talking about it, and they're saying, we think we're not MiCA compliant because we're a decentralized exchange. We don't. But then the regulators at some point are going to look at them and say, well, there's that part that is centralized, and therefore you are MiCA compliant.
I just hope they've got good legal counsel, these firms.
Yeah, they have to. I wouldn't want to be the lawyers with my neck on the line trying to do that. But so it's a very interesting space. In terms of how the regulators are going to proceed, we've mentioned, I'm hoping there's going to be a lot of hand-holding, because with regulators, sometimes they get a little bit of a bad reputation, especially the SEC. They've had not the best reputation in the public space of how they deal with firms, and especially with their recent action, trying to go after, for example, Ripple. It was seen a little bit like they're trying to come down hard on it to put their authority there and say, we're throwing our weight around a little bit. What I much prefer to see with regulators is a little bit of, look, we understand, we want to do things right. We want to make sure we're compliant. We want to make sure we're doing things right. We need a little bit more guidance on how we actually get there. We want to work with you to become compliant. And I hope the regulators will be much more like that towards firms, especially these crypto asset service providers, which have this difficult decision to make around non-MiCA compliant tokens that are on their exchange and how to handle that. So I hope there is a little bit of that. How do you think the different regulators might deal with this? Like MiFID, for example. How was MiFID rolled out? How did regulators, any firm that was non-MiFID compliant, how did they deal with it? Because if they don't take action, then what is the point of being compliant? Well, it costs money to become compliant. It costs money to have the regulators, liking you. If you're not going to put out fines or anything like that, there's no reason, that's how firms might see it. There's no reason to be compliant. Therefore, we have a competitive advantage because of the fact that we're not spending money doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So what do you think? There needs to be some sort of.
Yeah, so if we look at history by way of example, so MiFID, some of the biggest fines were levied the year after. So 2019, we've got some, I can't remember all the numbers and all the firms offhand now, but I think they're between 20 and 30 million pounds. These fines were issued up mainly about best execution, reporting not done, on the multitude of trades, then reporting has to be back reported. Exactly. Yeah. And so judging by that, I can foresee. Again, we've got the grandfathering period. That wasn't as applicable under MiFID. So let's
1 to 2 years then.
1 to 2 years, exactly. And so I'll foresee 25, 26 that some of the fines will be put out there. Obviously this is saying the regulator's not going to be putting out there, because it essentially gives you a further grace period of,
Yes.
we've done my best, as long as you get your house ordered a year after it goes live. So, but there will be penalties. And if there isn't penalties, like you said, it's the whole point of a level playing field and harmonisation. If you've got firms not adhering to it because it's cheaper to do so, then it defeats the object. So,
okay, so in terms of MiFID, did the fines then have a impact? Do you think that firms were then becoming more compliant as soon as the fines were being given out?
Yes and no. Okay. What I mean by that is there was 4 or 5 firms, big firms, who got these fines levied, but fines always do stir people into action, okay. and so fines, censures, these tools are there for a purpose. I mean, it's not just to claw back money so that it can be used for the greater good in better regulations and more consultations. It's done to show firms. Because the penalty is one thing as well. It's also about public image. If you've got firms who are not adhering and not playing by the as per the rules, then if I was an investor, I'd be looking at why do I want to.
Exactly. You can see online. You can see which firms are getting the finance and which the regulators are saying these aren't adhering.
Yeah, and have a look. These fines are all online, and you can.
Talking about recent fines, Coinbase, the FCA put out a fine to Coinbase. It was settled. Sort of like a not a closed door settlement, but it was a pleasant, I think, settlement, an amicable decision.
Yeah, with a nice 30% discount.
30% discount.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that fine for? Was that anything to do with MiCA? I'm guessing not. I'm guessing it was more to do with MiFID, was it?
That was more to do with sort of onboarding,
or marketing, or
AML controls, and
okay, so that's under a completely different regulation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But what's clear is that the regulators are taking action, and so there's different types of regulators. There's different ways of how they might deal with this. What's interesting is I think if I had to come up with some examples of regulators which are at different stages, I'd say the SEC is perhaps behind the times in terms of this, and it'll be interesting to see how America adopts something similar to MiCA. You've got the FCA, the UK regulators. Maybe they're in the middle. They are they want to make sure something like, what is the UK doing when it comes to MiCA, by the way?
So they've got their own crypto regulations, but you are right. I think there's a lot of. I think the SEC, FCA are sort of taking a backseat,
and they're going to watch what MiCA happens.
Suck it and see approach. Yeah, let's see how does MiCA fall. What should we adopt? Yeah, I think when they do, they will adopt it. Maybe they might even bring in a few additional measures where things are going wrong with MiCA.
A little bit of gold plating.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it will be the template that will be adopted.
Because there's some regulators which are way ahead of the times, which had regulations out, many years before MiCA. And for example, that was the Blockchain Act, was the Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein brought out the Blockchain Act, which is forward-thinking regulations. So that there was already this framework around for firms going to Liechtenstein to say, this is how you can operate to be compliant and to make sure you're doing things right. So they were way ahead of the time. And my understanding is various aspects of the Blockchain Act will still remain as a gold plating of MiCA for Liechtenstein and the regulator in Liechtenstein.
And this is it. I mean, a small country like Liechtenstein, they saw the direction of travel. They saw crypto assets becoming more mainstream. It was going to be an increasing asset class that needed to be catered for via framework and regulations. They saw that. They didn't wait for Europe to tell them what needed to be done. They grabbed the ball by the horns. And this is what I mean. When we were looking at what countries to become registered in, this is a big thing for us. We want to work with a progressive regulator, and this is coming to our thinking when we've been picking the jurisdiction, and it's a good country to highlight. Many people, Liechtenstein would be off many people's radar, but if I recommend having a look at the Blockchain Act, TTVG, and seeing some of the great stuff that was done by them, and it is even adopted by.
Well, I think that's it. They've been a big part of the MiCA discussions, as I understand, and you do see a lot of Liechtenstein and representatives of Liechtenstein making waves in big conferences in the Web3 space. They are active there. They are promoting the country. They're promoting why you should go to Liechtenstein. So I do think they are very pro Web3, and that's come through with the regulations that were brought out several years ago.
Yeah, really progressive, and it seems like it's a good country to do business in.
Brilliant. So to summarize, if I can, MiCA is coming out. Markets in crypto assets. So Mark, jump on me if I'm wrong on any of this. Markets in crypto assets, set of regulations which are not to replace MiFID. They are to bring clarity and confidence to a space that isn't currently regulated. It was discussed several years ago. It was in Parliament a couple of years ago. It is now coming into force. In end of June, it came into force for stablecoins. End of December, it's coming into force for utility tokens, for asset reference tokens, for crypto service providers such as exchanges, portfolio managers, and custodials. Some stablecoins are not currently MiCA compliant. Some are, and they are sort of like best in house at the moment for showing how it can be done. For the likes of Valhalla Network, we're going to be utility tokens, so therefore we have certain steps we have to take to become MiCA compliant, such as the big one is our white paper and making sure that we make the various regulator, the National Competent Authority for Valhalla Network, making sure they're aware and that they have received our white paper and can see that. And do they actually have to give an assessment on it, or do they just get informed of it actually?
Yeah, so the guidance says that you're meant to notify the NCA, but the NCA will not rubber stamp it.
So
you're
formally you make them aware of it, and you'd hope that the NCA in question, if there's something seriously wrong with your white paper, they would then come down on you and make sure you fix it. So that's the sort of protection there. So it comes into full force sort of end of December, at which point there might be a grandfathering period, like a grace period for the various national competent authority, because this is only applying for Europe, to be clear. So the national competent authority in European member state to be able to bring in their own sort of way of doing things, their own way of regulating it and working with the companies and make sure everyone's on a level playing field. And perhaps in 2025, 2026, fines might start being levied for firms that aren't compliant. And it's going to be an interesting time.
Sure will be.
So that's a pretty good summary, I think, for our conversation. Excellent. So yeah, thanks for joining us today, Mark. So reminder, Mark is our head of compliance at Valhalla Network, has been in right from the start of the project and has been getting his head in the space. So thanks for joining us today. Any closing statements from you that you would like to share as well for the viewers?
I hope this has given everyone a good flavour as to MiCA. It's all its array of complexity, and I would strongly advise you get on our socials, because I'm going to be doing posting about what consultation papers are coming in, the ramifications. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Well, like I said, we will actually be getting our blog out over the next couple of weeks as well on MiCA that the team has been writing. As Mark's mentioned, the team will be much more active as well over the next up to December and roll out of MiCA on how it's going and what we're hearing and what we're doing as well and what utility tokens have to do to become MiCA compliant. And follow us along. And I hope you enjoy the vlogs when they go out.